The wind screamed across Granite Hollow like a wounded thing, flinging curtains of snow through the pines and stripping the world down to white and gray. Winter had come hard to Wyoming, swallowing trails and silencing the forest. The radio towers were down, cell signals dead. For the rangers stationed at the wildlife preserve, it was the kind of storm that tested more than endurance. It tested instinct. Leah Monroe tightened the hood of her parka and adjusted the frost-covered goggles clinging to her face. Her boots sank halfway to the knee in snowdrifts, each step crunching beneath her weight. Behind her, the patrol unit of Mustangs moved like living shadows, hooves muffled by the storm. "Visibility's under 50 feet," Wyatt Kane muttered beside her, his breath fogging the inside of his balaclava. The rookie ranger stumbled slightly, catching himself on a snow-laced branch. How the hell are they still moving in this? "They don't need sight," Leah said. "They remember the ground." She didn't look at him. Her eyes were on the one leading the herd. Ash, no reins, no rope, no whistle. Just that broad-shouldered, frost-dusted Mustang moving like he knew where he was going, even when the world didn't. Ash wasn't technically a wild horse anymore. He'd been retired from service years ago, the record sparse and redacted, but everyone in the division knew better. Ash wasn't just a horse. He was history that walked. A jagged silver scar ran from the tip of his left ear down his cheek, threading into the thick winter coat along his jaw. Nobody talked about it. Not because they didn't care, but because Ash carried it the way a soldier might wear old shrapnel. Unspoken. Undeniable. The herd trailed behind him, a dozen strong, cutting through the blizzard with the kind of fluidity that made humans feel like amateurs on their own land. It wasn't just impressive, it was unnerving. Then Ash stopped. No signal, no noise, no threat Leah could see. He simply halted mid-stride, head up, ears twitching. The other horses slowed behind him, shifting uneasily, confused. Ash turned his head slightly into the wind and let out a breath that steamed into the snow, as if tasting something on the air. Leah felt it in her spine before she even saw it. Something tightening, something wrong. "Ash," she called. "Easy, boy." Wyatt raised his gloved hand to his lips and whistled the two-tone recall. Ash didn't flinch, didn't even blink. "He's not responding," Wyatt said. "Want me to try the remote collar?" "Number not yet." Leah took one step forward, and Ash bolted. Not a spook, not a flinch. He launched off the trail like a silent explosion, plunging into the trees to their right. The snow swallowed him within seconds, the rest of the world turning ghost white behind him. "What the hell?" Wyatt stumbled after him. "Hold position!" Leah barked. "Don't follow!" But it was already happening. A ripple moved through the herd. One by one, 3 more Mustangs peeled off from the group. Not running after Ash directly, but fanning out, moving into the woods like they'd all heard the same silent call. Leah's chest tightened. This wasn't just a break. This was a response, a signal. She slapped her radio. Static, no use. She turned to Wyatt. "Mark the coordinates. We're heading after him. Now." The 2 rangers cut through the trees, the snow rising deeper with every step. Branches cracked beneath the weight of frost and storm. Somewhere ahead, hoof prints were already filling with white. 10 minutes passed, then 20. And just when Leah was about to call it, when the frostbite was beginning to gnaw at the edges of her fingers and her pulse thundered in her ears, they found him. Ash stood motionless in a small clearing beneath a gnarled old pine, his body soaked with snow. The air was still here, like the storm had stopped at the edge of the branches. Quiet, too quiet. Then Leah saw her. 10 feet above the ground, a woman hung upside down from a thick limb. Her legs were bound at the ankles with what looked like climbing rope, her arms tied cruelly behind her back. Blood had dried in a line from her forehead down to her jaw, and her parka was torn open at the shoulder, revealing bruises the color of ash. Leah's breath caught. "Jesus," Wyatt whispered, stepping forward. "Is she?" "Alive," Leah cut in. "She's alive." Ash hadn't moved. He stood like a sentinel beneath the woman's body, head lowered, his breath rising in steady streams. His front legs were tucked slightly beneath him, like he'd knelt and only half risen. Reverent. Leah approached carefully, drawing her knife and moving beneath the limb. Wyatt climbed one of the lower branches, reaching to support the body while Leah sliced the rope. When the last cord snapped, the woman fell awkwardly into Wyatt's arms, groaning faintly. They eased her onto the ground. Her lips were cracked and blue, her face pale with cold. She blinked once, twice, barely registering the world. Then her gaze locked on Ash. Her breath hitched. She opened her mouth, and with a voice so raw it sounded torn from her throat, she whispered, "Valor." Ash lifted his head at the sound. Not all the way, just enough. The name hovered in the air like smoke, like memory, and no one, not Leah, not Wyatt, knew what to say. But Ash did. He stepped forward, gently touched his muzzle to the woman's boot, and held it there. Not searching. Remembering. The ranger station at Granite Hollow was a fortress of creaking timber, flickering lanterns, and the low hum of backup generators. Outside, the blizzard had buried the world in silence, turning the preserve into a snowbound tomb. Inside, the air buzzed with tension and heat, the kind that didn't come from fire, but from fear. Harper Lane lay motionless beneath a thermal blanket, her body wrapped in layers of wool and emergency insulation. A nasal cannula delivered warmed oxygen to her cracked lips. Leah Monroe knelt beside her, checking vitals with a military steadiness she hadn't used since Kandahar. Harper's skin was icy, her hands swollen with cold, but her pulse held steady. Barely. "She's going to make it," Leah murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "Who is she?" Wyatt Kane asked, standing a few feet away, staring at the woman like she might explode into some other form. "Why the hell was she strung up in the forest like that?" "I don't know," Leah replied, "but Ash found her first." That sentence alone made the room tilt. Ash had never broken formation, never ignored a command, never disappeared into the wild like some spirit chasing a dream. Until today. Harper stirred. Her eyelids twitched beneath a crown of frost-bitten lashes. Her breath hitched, then caught. She exhaled like it was the first time in years. Then her eyes opened. Leah moved closer. "Easy," she said softly. "You're safe now." Harper blinked, disoriented. Her voice came out broken and dry. "Ash?" Leah's spine straightened. "Yes, he's here. He's the one who found you." Harper's mouth twitched in a fragile smile. Then her gaze locked on Leah. "You don't understand," she whispered. "That's not just a horse. That's valor." Leah froze. Behind her, Wyatt shifted. "Wait, valor? That name you mumbled back there, what does that mean?" Harper tried to sit up. The pain stopped her. Her eyes fluttered shut for a moment, but when they reopened, something had changed in them. Less panic now, more purpose. "My name is Harper Lane. I used to work for a black-budget program under the Department of the Interior, and other agencies I'll never be allowed to name. It was called Project Wild Crest." Leah's jaw tightened. "I've heard whispers. Behavioral research. War animals." "Not war animals," Harper said, her voice growing clearer. "Weapons." She looked away, toward the frosted window where Ash stood outside, unmoving, like a statue carved from memory and snow. "There were 6 of them," she said, voice distant now. "Mustangs. Selected for temperament, intelligence, responsiveness. We didn't train them, we conditioned them, created emotional triggers, taught them to respond to coded gestures, taught them to read the field without needing a handler. 2 rose above the rest. One was Valor, the other was Ash. Leah sat back, stunned. You're saying Ash was in that program? Was? Harper nodded slowly. He and Valor were bonded like brothers. We paired them for emotional resonance. Ash was the calm center. Valor, the wildfire? Wyatt crossed his arms. If this program existed, how did it end up buried? Harper smiled bitterly. Because they crossed a line. They tried to erase choice from living creatures, to hardwire obedience as instinct. We called it imprinting. But when they pushed Valor into the next phase without me, something went wrong. He disappeared, and then so did the records. Leah's eyes narrowed. So, why were you hanging from a tree? Harper's expression darkened, because I started asking questions again. I've spent years off-grid, tracking whispers, trying to locate what they did with Valor. I got too close, someone found me. They didn't kill me outright, probably wanted me to suffer first. Outside, the wind howled and pressed against the station like a living thing. Ash stood in its path, unmoving. Harper's voice grew quiet. I never expected to see him again. Ash, I thought he was destroyed along with the rest of Crest. Leah stood and stepped to the door, opening it just enough to look out. Ash turned his head slightly, acknowledging her with a silent glance. Then he did something strange. He stepped forward, pawed at the snow and struck the ground, once, then again, then a third time, 3 deliberate taps. Harper's eyes widened. It's a code. Leah turned back. What? It's from Crest, Harper said breathlessly. We taught them. 3 taps meant, I remember. A chill rolled down Leah's back that had nothing to do with the snow outside. The next morning, after stabilizing Harper and reporting a scrambled emergency dispatch, Leah and Wyatt followed Ash into the woods. He led them back to the clearing, but not to the tree where they found Harper. Instead, he veered deeper, through half-buried game trails and old-growth pine. Finally, he stopped near a ridge of black stone half buried in snow. There, at the base of a twisted spruce, Ash pawed the earth with a slow, rhythmic motion. Not frantic, focused. After several minutes, he unearthed a metal canister, rusted, sealed with a military-grade cap. Leah opened it carefully, heart hammering. Inside, wrapped in a torn field dressing, was a piece of paper. A quarter of a military map. Sector markings. Surveyor lines. A single red X drawn in permanent ink. Harper stared at it with wide eyes. That's Sector 0, she said. It's where they moved Valor for final testing. A canyon lab hidden below a fake wildlife research site. Wyatt stepped closer. Why would Ash have buried this? Harper's voice cracked. Because he knew I'd come back for him. Leah folded the map gently. We go at first light. Harper looked down at Ash. He looked back, and in that moment nothing needed to be said. They weren't just following a trail. They were following memory. The sun never fully rose that morning. It hovered behind thick veils of gray cloud, bleeding faint light into the frozen landscape. Snow had slowed, but not stopped, dusting the treetops with fresh powder and painting silence across Granite Hollow like a secret. By the time Leah, Harper, Wyatt, and Ash reached the trailhead, the forest felt like it had swallowed time. Leah adjusted the strap of her rifle across her chest and checked the map again, the torn piece they'd recovered from the canister. Sector 0, she muttered. Coordinates match the old Firewatch range, but the elevation lines dip too fast. There's something buried beneath it. Harper stood beside her. wrapped in a thick ranger coat, her bruises still dark but her eyes burning with purpose. "It's not just buried," she said. "It was hidden deliberately. Wild Crest didn't want it found again." Ash stood ahead of them on the ridge, hooves half covered in frost, ears flicking at the wind. He hadn't once hesitated during the climb. The way he moved, deliberate, unafraid, made it feel less like they were leading him, and more like he was guiding them. Wyatt adjusted his backpack. "So, what are we expecting to find down there? Files, equipment, bones?" Harper didn't answer at first. Then she said, "Ghosts." The path narrowed into a canyon of jagged black rock, natural but eerily symmetrical. As they descended, the temperature dropped fast. Leah felt it in her lungs, that sharp bite of cold that warned of places the sun rarely touched. Eventually, the trail ended in a sheer cliff wall covered in ice. Ash walked up to the stone and stopped. Then, just like he had in the snow, he tapped his hoof 3 times. Leah stepped forward and ran her glove across the stone. Her fingers brushed something smooth, metal. She scraped away the ice and snow until a seam appeared, then a keypad, almost indistinguishable from the rock around it. "Jesus," Wyatt breathed. "That's biometric." Harper knelt beside it. "I remember the code patterns," she whispered. "They were designed to reset after shutdown, but Ash must have kept the path, embedded coordinates. That's how he led us." She pressed a sequence on the faded keypad, then paused. Leah raised an eyebrow. "What?" Harper hesitated. "There's a retina scan override, but the only way to trick it is with heat and pulse rhythm, like a living organism." She looked at Ash. Leah shook her head. "No way." But Ash stepped forward before anyone could stop him. He placed his head against the stone directly over the scanner. The panel lit faintly, blinked red, then green. With a low, mechanical hiss, the cliff wall cracked open. The hallway beyond smelled of rust and stale air. Lights flickered weakly overhead, powered by old batteries that somehow still clung to life. The walls were lined with white tile, smeared with dust and time. Footprints, some human, some not, trailed through the grime. "This isn't a lab," Wyatt muttered. "It's a tomb." They moved cautiously, boots crunching on broken glass and debris. At one point, they passed a collapsed observation room. Through a cracked viewing window, Leah saw steel restraints bolted to a slab of concrete, now covered in old blood. Harper didn't speak. Her face was tight, unreadable, but her steps never wavered. Finally, they reached the stables, a long corridor of reinforced steel doors, each marked with a number, C1, C2, C3, then Cell 4. Ash stopped there. The door was partially open. The lock mechanism snapped clean. Leah pushed it wide. The stall was empty, but not untouched. A thick groove ran across the steel wall, as if something had struck it repeatedly. And there, etched into the metal with deliberate force, was a single, jagged shape. V. Harper staggered forward, her hand tracing the edges of the carving. "He was here," she whispered. "Valor." He remembered who he was. Leah moved around the room, inspecting scuffed walls, snapped wiring, broken sensors. "There's no sign of handlers, just him." Harper nodded. They left him, alone. Probably after the final trial phase failed. He wasn't supposed to survive without control input. Wyatt frowned. Then, how did he get out? That was when Ash neighed, low and sharp. He pawed at the corner of the stall where the concrete was cracked. Harper knelt down. "There's something under here." Together, they pried the slab loose and revealed a hidden tunnel beneath. It wasn't wide, just enough for an animal to crawl through. Scratch marks lined the inside, blood too. "Dear God," Harper murmured. Wyatt backed up. Where does that go? Leah picked up a rusted schematic from the wall and flipped it open. There, she pointed. Containment Vault D. They followed the tunnel markers through another corridor, one with heavier security, thicker walls, and doors labeled in military red. A warning sign blinked dimly. Biohazard. Do not enter without suit authorization. Vault D, Leah said. They opened the last door. Inside, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. The vault wasn't a room. It was a containment ring. Glass viewing stations surrounded a steel pen built like a cage inside a cage. The inside walls were clawed and battered. Some metal beams were warped, bent outward. In the center of the room, chains lay slack on the floor. And beside them, 3 distorted hoofprints. Each print was larger than a normal Mustang's. Broader, deeper, not natural. Leah's mouth went dry. These aren't Ash's, and they're not Valor's either. Harper stared at them in horror. These belonged to something else. Something unfinished. Wyatt swallowed hard. You think it's still out there? I think it never left, Harper whispered. Leah turned to Ash. He wasn't looking at the hoof prints. He was staring into the glass, at his own reflection. And then he did something that made the breath catch in Leah's throat. He stepped back, and for the first time since they'd arrived, he looked afraid. The power had gone out at Granite Hollow Preserve 3 hours before sunset. The emergency generators kicked in for just long enough to trigger the gate locks, then sputtered out like a match in a blizzard. Leah Monroe stood near the ranger tower, wind howling through the bare limbs, eyes squinting into the coming night. Something was wrong. The forest felt off, too still, too heavy, like it was holding its breath. Ash stood behind her, tense, his muscles twitching under his coat like wires stretched too tight. Still no signal, Wyatt muttered, tapping his dead radio. He stood on the porch of the cabin, lantern in hand, face pale. Whatever fried the grid hit our comms hard. Leah glanced back at Harper, who was inside organizing what little gear they had left. Any luck with the satellite uplink? Harper shook her head from the window. Dead as everything else. EMP maybe, or worse, deliberate interference. That word hung there, deliberate. Ash suddenly snapped his head to the left, ears swiveling. Leah followed his gaze. The tree line was moving, not the wind, not branches, shapes. They came slowly at first, shadows gliding through snow like predators too big to exist in silence. Then the first hoof broke through, black, wet with melting ice, plated with something that glinted like synthetic armor. Then another, then a third. 3 Mustangs emerged from the woods. At least they had once been Mustangs. Now their bodies shimmered with patches of biomechanical plating, tubing laced through their flesh like veins of cold steel. Their eyes glowed faintly red beneath layers of cybernetic mesh. But only one of them walked straight, without hesitation. The one in the middle. Ash took 1 step forward. Harper stepped out from the cabin and froze. Oh my God! It's him, Valor. His coat, once chestnut brown, was now streaked with graphite gray and faded white. His left eye was fully artificial, metal iris rotating as it scanned the preserve. One of his flanks bore the old Wild Crest brand, half burned and overwritten with a triangle of circuitry. But beneath it all, beneath the armor, the machinery, was the way he moved, deliberate, proud, and angry. The other 2 hybrids flanked him, creations Harper didn't recognize. Their bodies twitched like things built in a lab that never finished baking. One's jaw was half-exposed metal. The other's spine glowed faintly beneath the skin. Wyatt stepped forward, stunned, Are those soldiers? They were supposed to be prototypes, Harper whispered. But those aren't Phase 1, that's X7 and X9. They were never cleared for open terrain. I thought they were failures. They are, Leah said grimly, but not in the way you think. Ash let out a low, guttural noise. Not a whinny, not a scream. A challenge. And Valor responded. He surged forward. The two collided in the snow with a thunderous crash, shoulder to shoulder, hooves slicing into the ground. The other hybrids circled wide, pacing like wolves on the edge of a duel. Leah and Wyatt raised their rifles, but Harper threw out a hand. No, she said. This isn't random, it's ritual. Watch Ash and Valor struck again, front hooves slamming into one another, rearing and twisting, never aiming to kill, but to mark. To remember. Ash spun, landed a hard blow to Valor's flank. Valor didn't retaliate. Instead, he stepped back and stared. Then he moved. In one fluid motion, he stepped toward Ash, lowered his head, and with a motion as fast as lightning, slashed his synthetic hoof across Ash's shoulder. A diagonal mark, right over the old scar. Ash didn't flinch. Valor held his stance for several seconds. Then, he turned and walked away. The hybrids followed without a sound, vanishing into the woods like ghosts, like they'd never come. Silence returned to the preserve. Ash stood bleeding, but tall. The cut wasn't deep. It wasn't meant to be. It was a message. An hour later, as Leah and Wyatt tended to Ash's shoulder, headlights cut through the darkness beyond the main road. A government SUV rolled up the icy trail, crunching toward the station. Leah raised her weapon but lowered it when the figure stepped out. Dr. Dana Wells. She looked older than the last time Harper had seen her. Grayer around the temples, but still sharp, still crisp in a way that screamed military. She wore a U.S. Forest Service badge, but Harper knew that was just camouflage. "Fancy seeing you again, Harper," Dana said smoothly, her voice flat as winter stone. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I came for them," Dana said, nodding toward Ash. "And the others. I helped design them, and I'm here to bring them home." Leah stepped between them. "That's not happening." Dana raised a wrist. A control band shimmered beneath her sleeve. Old model, red light blinking. She pressed a button. Ash didn't move. Dana frowned, pressed again. Ash stared at her. Then, in a single deliberate move, he stepped forward, raised one hoof, and crushed the wristband into the snow. Dana flinched. "So much for obedience," Harper muttered. Dana looked from Ash to Harper, something unreadable in her expression. Then, without a word, she turned and walked back to the SUV. She didn't try again, didn't threaten, didn't plead, because she knew. The program had failed. Not because the animals were flawed, but because they remembered how to choose. That night, as snow began to fall again, Ash stood at the edge of the forest, staring into the dark. He didn't follow Valor, didn't move, just stood, breathing, remembering. Leah joined him, hands in her pockets, watching the tree line with him. "You're not going after him," she said softly. Ash didn't turn. He didn't need to, because this was goodbye. And some goodbyes didn't need words. They only needed memory. Spring came late to Granite Hollow, but it came all the same. The snow retreated like a secret no longer worth keeping, bearing the soft mossy floor of the valley and soaking the ranch in the scent of pine and thawed earth. The wind lost its bite. Wildflowers cracked open along the hillsides like tiny, defiant survivors. And the sanctuary, what had once been a place of drills, silence, and secrets, now breathed again. They called it Echo Mustang Sanctuary. Not an official agency, Not a military program, just a promise. Ash stood in the morning light, flank dappled with sun through budding trees, a new scar crossing the old one on his shoulder. His ears flicked lazily as the sound of distant hoofbeats drifted up from the training pasture below. 5 young Mustangs, rescued, confused, skittish, were moving through obstacle lines watched by 3 volunteer handlers. Ash wasn't their trainer. Not in the traditional sense. He never pushed, never forced. He simply stood where they could see him. And somehow, that was enough. Inside the main lodge, Harper Lane sat at a cluttered desk strewn with case files, sealed depositions, and photos that had finally seen the light of day. A large monitor replayed a segment from yesterday's Senate subcommittee hearing. She turned the volume up. According to the documents released by whistleblower Harper Lane and Ranger Leah Monroe, Project Crest, later renamed Operation Whitefire, violated at least 6 federal statutes, including unregulated genetic modification and unauthorized weapons development. Another senator leaned in. And the animals? What became of them? The spokesperson from the Department of the Interior shifted. Some were destroyed. Others were never recovered. But Echo Mustang Sanctuary has become a proposed oversight model moving forward. It proves these animals are more than assets. They're survivors, individuals. The video paused. Harper leaned back. "I didn't think we'd ever get here," Leah said, stepping into the room with 2 steaming mugs. She handed one to Harper. "I didn't think we'd survive," Harper replied quietly. Leah raised her mug. "To stubborn horses, and even more stubborn women." They clinked cups. That evening, the sun slipped low behind the pines, casting long shadows across the sanctuary. Ash stood alone at the far edge of the field, his eyes focused on the woods where Valor had vanished weeks earlier. Harper approached slowly, her coat pulled tight around her. "You still wait for him," she said softly. Ash didn't move. "I don't know if he's out there," she continued. "Or if the others are still following something they don't even remember. But I do know this." She reached into her coat and held out an envelope. No return address, no postage, just her name, written in all caps, blocky, military style. Harper opened it. Inside, a single piece of paper, typed in plain courier font. "Subject 0 is still alive. Phase dominance incoming. The ring is not broken." Her hand trembled slightly. Leah appeared behind her. "Another threat?" Harper shook her head, number A warning. Ash turned his head slowly, as if he'd sensed the shift in her breath. And then he began to move, not into the woods, but across the field. Pacing, methodical, circular. Leah watched, confused, until Harper whispered, "He's drawing." Leah narrowed her eyes. Sure enough, Ash's hooves carved lines into the softened earth, over and over until a shape took form. A spiral, inward, with 7 notches at the center. Harper stepped forward. "That's a containment glyph from the old vault. You think he's remembering?" Harper shook her head. "Number I think he's preparing." Later that night, Harper stood outside the barn, watching as Ash paced silently beneath the stars. Owls called in the distance. Wind moved through the trees with a soft rustle, almost like whispers. Footsteps approached. It was Wyatt, holding a bundle of mail and supply requisitions. "More donations," he said, grinning. "And someone from Montana wants to send their own retired patrol horse here. Apparently, he refuses to eat unless jazz music plays in the barn." Harper laughed. "Sounds about right." But her smile faded as she looked toward the woods again. "You think this place is enough?" Wyatt asked. "To protect them? To protect us?" Harper looked at Ash, scarred, silent, eternal. "I think it has to be." she said. She tucked the warning letter into her jacket. "And if it isn't, we'll do what they taught us to forget. We'll choose." Ash lifted his head, stared at her like he already knew. Morning returned with soft gold and a fresh breeze, and somewhere deep in the trees, far beyond the preserve, a sound moved through the shadows. Not a machine, not a storm, but something waking up and remembering.